Yesterday's news.
Hello and welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news stories of the day through the papers of yesterday. The Bishop has been much in the press of late, of course. Trying to do away with the vote of the Bishop in the upper house has been much in the news. You'll have your own view on that, no doubt. And Trish the Bish, the new Bishop, due to arrive on the island later on. So it sent me scurrying to the archives to see how the Bishop has fared over the years. And some stories you might feel are similar and some quite different. But the Bishop has fared in the papers quite a bit over the years. We can go right the way back to the Isle of Man Times of Saturday, June the 4th, 1887, to start, with the sad news of the death of the Bishop. As we announced in these columns on Saturday last, the Right Reverend Rowley Hill, Lord Bishop of this diocese, passed away on Friday evening, the 27th, at 9:45 at his London residence, 10 Hereford Square. His lordship, who had been complaining for some little time past, had an appointment at Sheffield on Wednesday week, intending to return to the island immediately afterwards, but not feeling well, he gave up the engagement. On the Friday morning, however, a very sudden change took place, and his medical attendant was at once summoned. Up to this time, the fatal character of his malady, which is said to be congestion of the liver, had been almost wholly unsuspected. But no improvement being perceived, in the afternoon a consultation took place with Sir William Gull, who gave no hope of recovery, and his lordship gradually sank and died peacefully at 9:45, having been unconscious since midday. The precise cause of death is not known at present, but his illness is said to have been principally brought about by excessive mental worrying. How that congests the liver, it doesn't actually say. Nonetheless, sadly, the Bishop passed away. There was a new Bishop at Bishop's Court, reported in the Manx Sun of Saturday, January the 16th of 1892, and the paper got something of an exclusive, an interview by our representative. The Bishop Designate and the free education and temperance questions were broached, the free and open church system, Douglas Head services. Delighted with Bishop's Court, apparently the Bishop, or the new Bishop, was. And it's beautifully phrased in that the poor reporter doesn't even get a byline. It's just our representative. And he came over on the boat, of course. Nothing could have been more gratifying than the courteous and pleasant way in which the Bishop Designate submitted to the ordeal of an interview. Honestly, they wouldn't know they were born these days, and we have no hesitation in saying that our first impressions of the future head of the Manx Church are decidedly favourable and prepossessing. The following interview took place. Our representative: I notice you had not a very pleasant passage yesterday. The Bishop Designate: No, it was rather a rough passage. Our representative: Very rough when you got out of the Mersey. I suppose you were troubled with mal de mer. The Bishop Designate: Oh, well, I'm a wonderfully good sailor as a rule, but certainly I did feel it a little yesterday. I bet he did. The paper's representative again: I notice you seem to have parted very regretfully with your Wakefield friends. And the Bishop Designate says: Very much so indeed. I've been working for this last 17 years amongst them, and as you can understand, many parties had to be severed. But at the same time, I don't deny, after all, to my mind, that the change is a rather grateful one after 17 years of incessant work of a particularly hard kind, I might say. The representative then goes on to ask: Have you come to any decision yet, sir, where you will take up your residence in the island, whether at Bishop's Court or at Douglas? The Bishop Designate says: I feel with respect to all these questions they are very difficult to answer, and I think I ought to be allowed quietly to think them over before I say anything. I suppose so, sir, says the representative. You know there is no cathedral in the Isle of Man. He should have come now. They find one now. The Bishop Designate: Well, I know the state of affairs. The representative says: I suppose it's too early yet to state whether you've decided upon in regard to that question. And the Bishop Designate says: I think that I said with regard to the other matter must apply to all these questions. I feel that it is in the interests of the Isle of Man I should become thoroughly acquainted with everything and hear what is to be said on all sides before I make any statements. You know, sir, says the representative, I suppose that free education is the burning political question in the Isle of Man at the present time. You will be a member of the legislature. Have you decided upon any opinion on free education? The Bishop-designate says, I'm very much interested in an educational question generally, but how the Act would apply to the Isle of Man is a matter about which I would rather gain information than to express any opinion at the present moment. I would like to hear what the Governor and Council have to say upon the question. I don't pretend to be a judge as to how the Act would apply here. He's keeping his powder dry on that one, isn't he? It goes on for quite some time. And then the representative says, now, sir, this is a very awkward question. What are your views upon the licensing question and the temperance question generally? This is another burning question in the Isle of Man at present. And at present, of course, being in the 19th century, 1892. Are you aware of that question on the island? We have Sunday closing here. You have, says the Bishop-designate. There is an agitation for Sunday opening on at present. The Bishop is at present a member of the Licensing Commission. I don't think he is now, or she will be. And he does not resign until the next Tynwald Court. The Bishop-designate says, I'm afraid I must not say any more on that general view now. I can only say I believe that the observance of the Lord's Day has made England great among the nations of the earth. I wish to see the sanctity of the Sabbath preserved. And then there were services just here by Manx Radio, where the Manx Radio building is now. The reporter says, the late Dr. Rowley Hill and the present Bishop have conducted open-air services on Douglas Head. And all of a sudden they swap from our representative to our reporter. Don't ask me why. So we have these services on Douglas Head during the summer for the benefit of local charities. Is that your intention to do the same? The Bishop-designate says, nothing will give me greater pleasure than to do the same. And then finally, the reporter now, not the representative, says your appointment to this diocese has met with a certain amount of hostile criticism, I notice, in some sections of the press. The Bishop-designate says, yes, you have seen it, I have seen it too. Have you any remark to make upon that? Says the reporter, to which the Bishop-designate says, no. I think it would be the same reply now. In the Times, the Isle of Man Times of Sunday, January the 18th, 1902, Bishops' Wives is a short piece. Bishops' wives are scarcely recognised as existing. The bishop's true spouse is his see. No other is recognised. He impales the arms of his see with his own coat of arms. Since the Reformation, bishops wed like other mortals. Heralds and Houses of Lords refuse to recognise the supposed irregularity. They still hold that a spiritual lord has no wife on whom to confer title, no spouse except his see, with whom to share his honours. In respect of their persons, bishops are not peers with the nobility. My lord is simply a courtesy title. Therefore, says the Weekend, the wife of a bishop is simply addressed as Mrs. and not my lady. Now, speaking of that educational crisis, in the Peel City Guardian of Saturday, January the 27th, 1906, members of the Council of Education resign. A letter from the Lord Bishop at the Bishop's Court, dated January the 4th of 1905. My Lord, it is with sincere pain and regret I feel compelled to tender you to herewith my resignation as a member of the Council of Education, and to ask you as President of Tynwald Court to communicate this step on my part to that body, and also the resignation of the Archdeacon and the Speaker, formal notice of which I enclose. Speaking for myself, I may say that for 13 years or more the Council of Education have done me the honour to elect me as their chairman, and I cannot leave without giving expression to the happy relations which have existed during that time between the other members and myself, and the confident hope which I entertain that we've been able to do good service to the cause of education in the Isle of Man. But in thus tendering my resignation to you, I feel it only due to you and to the Tynwald Court I should explain the reasons which appear to me to have rendered the step essential. I will therefore proceed to do so in the briefest possible manner. Well, that does go on for quite a few columns, but basically is unhappy with the fact that it's been rejected, the Free Education Bill. The first and principle which the Council of Education recommended was that there should be one central authority for secondary education here. Even as in England, only we proposed, in view of its important and financial functions, that it should be directly elected by the ratepayers ad hoc. It appears, however, this main principle did not commend itself to the lower branch of the legislature, the Keys, which I regret to say declined to accept the deliberate and carefully formed conclusions on this matter of its executive, and was moreover so divided in its opinions that as a result nothing definite was determined upon, and on the question whether there should be one authority in the island for secondary education or many, the voting proved not only that, quote, hominis tut sentesti, if that is the correct pronunciation in Latin, I'm afraid I never studied Latin, the bill was wrecked, and wrecked in such a way I understand there is now no prospect of any alternative scheme being adopted before August next, when our final time of grace expires. Personally, he says, I cannot but hope that the disastrous consequences to the island of this state of things are not fully perceived and appreciated by those who have brought it about, but I fear that not only will it certainly result in the non-recognition of our existing schools by the educational authorities in England, in which case they will be placed in a position of hopeless inferiority, if indeed they can be maintained at all, but also our hopes of receiving outside assistance in the matter of secondary education, intimation of which has been publicly given, will be endangered in the absence of any definite scheme for this purpose, while the clever and promising young scholars in the island will be cut off from those opportunities of advancement in life to which I, for one, have so earnestly looked forward, and which many of our greatest statesmen here in the past have anticipated with hope. Under these circumstances, he said, and having no satisfactory proposals to offer with a view to remedy the present state of things, and no practical advice to give to our educational officials who desire to consult with the Council in the present distress, I feel the only course open to me, in consistence with the time-honoured precedents of public life in this country, is to tender the resignation of my seat in the Council of Education, and thus to make room for those who, having wrecked the bill we initiated, are, I trust, in duty bound to propose some practicable scheme which shall at once meet the demands of the Board of Education in England and at the same time the necessities of the Isle of Man. Your obedient servant, etc., etc. Well, goodness me. Quite a thing, as they say. And yes, the bishop still courts controversy now, a mere 112 years on. And finally, a quick look at Bishop Thompson's debut, as listed in the Isle of Man Examiner of Saturday, April the 6th, 1912. He was delayed because of the coal strike. Bishop Denton Thompson's first official act after consecration to the episcopate of Sodor and Man was accomplished last Monday and took the form of administration of the rite of confirmation to a number of young people in St George's Church in Douglas. The confirmation service had been fixed for Sunday night, and it was also the intention that the new bishop should hold a similar service on Sunday afternoon in St Matthew's Church. But in this case, the bishop proposed, and the coal strikers disposed. Good line. His lordship left Birmingham on Saturday morning by train, which he had reason for believing would land him at Liverpool in time to catch the mail steamer from that port to Douglas. But the dislocation of railway traffic as a consequence of the coal strike was such that the train the bishop travelled by was so late in arrival at Liverpool that the diocesan of Sodor and Man found the steamer had sailed. His lordship at once got into telegraphic communication with persons in the Isle of Man affected by his failure to catch the boat, and steps were taken to announce the postponement of the confirmations, that at St George's to Monday night and that at St Matthew's to Wednesday night. Then on Monday the bishop travelled from Liverpool to Douglas by the RMS Douglas, who made good passage, and on landing at the Victoria Pier his lordship was met by his Vicar General, Mr C.T.W. Hughes Games, and several of the clergy. He drove in the Vicar General's motor car, couldn't have been many of those around in 1912, to Mr Hugh Games' residence, Holme-Lee, where he stayed during his sojourn on the island. Was Holme-Lee the house that was demolished up on Woodburn Road? I can't remember now. That was then became civil defence. It might have been. Answers on a postcard. Still causing some controversy now for different reasons on the Isle of Man, but never far from the news, it seems. The Bishop of Sodor and Man. It's all well news, as they say. Cheerio. You're gonna be yesterday's news.